Today on Sky World News, the Taliban are blamed for a sharp rise in casualties among Afghan civilians. Deaths are up by nearly a third this year. As Pakistan's floods threaten more areas, the government's under fire for the way it's handled the disaster. Rescuers try to remove a mountain of mud to find the hundreds missing after China's massive landslide. Campbell issues a statement saying she had no reason to lie over the blood diamonds at a war crimes trial. A test for autism. British scientists announced a breakthrough scan that could diagnose a condition in just 15 minutes. And in the sport, flawless Federer. The Swiss has a successful start at the Canadian Masters. Now let's cross to Summit TV.
Good morning, I'm Sumay Zaki from Summit TV. Here's a look at how the bourses were lost trading across the African continent. In Southern Africa, South Africa's all-share index shed over 1%, but the LUSE in Zambia closed 0.1% in positive territory. Over in West Africa, Ivory Coast Composite ended over 0.5% in the red, and Nigeria's all-share was 1% weaker. In East Africa, Kenya's NSE lost 0.86%, the Mauritian Index added 0.18%, and Uganda's Composite was over 0.2% firmer. Taking a look at the currencies now, in Southern Africa, US dollar buys you 6.61 Botswana Pula, 7.23 South African Rands and 4,783 Zambian Kwacha. In West Africa, you pay almost 1.4 Ghanaian cedi a dollar, just more than 484 Ivory Coast francs and 148 Nigerian naira for the greenback. Finally, in East Africa, you will get 75.94 Kenyan shillings for a dollar, over 28.5 Mauritian rupees and 2,165 Ugandan shillings for $1. Look at what's making business news on the African continent. Starting off in South Africa, shareholders in ArcelorMittal South African business are paying dearly for its bungle over the cession rights. Last year, the group failed to convert those rights, and that had two damaging results. First, it lost out on its cut-price iron ore from Kumba, and second, it allowed an off-the-shelf firm to sweep in and bag the rights, a 21.4% prospecting share. That firm is Imperial Crown Trading. Arcelor's now swooped on ICT. It's forking out $110 million to buy the firm. The deal, however, is conditional on ICT holding on to the rights. Kumba maintains the allocation of those rights to ICT was irregular and says it will continue fighting the decision in court. Still in South Africa, government workers began striking yesterday, threatening to shut services and disrupt the economy. Pundits warn that will do the local currency there no favors. It shed 1% to trade at 7.26 to the dollar. That's the biggest slide in 3 weeks. Workers are out over pay and they're demanding an 8.6% wage increase and a housing subsidy of $137. But government made its final pay offer last week. That's an increase of 7% and a housing allowance of $87. Unions say that's an insult and have mobilized their members. All in all, 1.3 million could stay away from work. Zambia is hunting investors for its copper mining sector. The metal is the country's economic lifeblood and it's Africa's leading producer. Authorities now want to ramp up production and they've targeted 750,000 tons for this year. They want to raise that to 1 million by 2012. Authorities say they're looking to invest in exploration activities and offering to keep taxes low. Zambia's mining royalties are amongst the most favorable at 3%. That's compared with 5% of other African countries. Foreign miners, they include London-listed Vedanta Resources, Canada's First Quantum Minerals and Meteorix of South Africa. Taking a look at news in brief, Egypt's inflation is unchanged at 10.7% in July. That's in line with forecasts. It dropped to $42 million in the first half of the year from $60 million a year earlier. South Africa's National Assembly approved legislation aimed at protecting the independence of the central bank and limiting the amount of influence that private shareholders can wield over its operations. I'm Sumay Zaki. That's the African Business News Roundup from Johannesburg. It's back to you in London.
Time now for a look at our currencies and our markets. US stocks ended lower on Tuesday, but well off the day's low point. The fall came after the Federal Reserve said it would take new steps to counter a weak recovery. The Dow slipped around 54 points. The Fed plans to begin funneling proceeds from mature mortgage bonds into longer-term government debt to keep borrowing costs low. The market's response was lukewarm. A satellite weather map, Berliner Zeitung from Germany, shows the devastating Russian fires that have environmental and health consequences. German paper The Frankfurter Allgemeine looks at US plans to cut military spending by $100 billion in the next 5 years. There are likely to be at least 3 Spanish victims among the dead from floods in India's northernmost region of Ladakh, writes El País from Spain. The Independent from the UK leads on news that British scientists have developed a scan which could diagnose autism in just 15 minutes. Le Monde from France shows the major branch of a railway line under construction to run TGV trains. And Jyllands-Posten from Denmark illustrates some of the jobs that may be affected by parliamentary plans to criminalise moonlighting.
Hello again, it's time for the sports headlines. Brazil have beaten the USA 2-0 in a friendly in New Jersey in their first match under new coach Mano Menezes. World number 2, Roger Federer, has beaten Argentinian Juan Ignacio Chela 7-6, 6-3 in the opening round of the Canadian Masters in Toronto. And Tiger Woods says he's focused and ready ahead of this week's US PGA at Whistling Straits in Wisconsin, the year's final major.
The southeast of Africa will be sunny, dry and warm, but a wind off the Indian Ocean means it'll be much cooler in the east with a fair amount of cloud. Tanzania, Mozambique, Zanzibar and Burundi will see some showery outbreaks. Madagascar will see rain in the east too, while the Seychelles will have showers. The equatorial belt, meanwhile, will see widespread showers, but they'll be few and far between over Somalia and largely confined to the coast in Kenya.